Have you ever been treated like you were worthless by the very people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever sat at a family dinner and realized that everyone in the room had already decided what you were worth? My family had. For years, they believed my brother was the successful one. He had the expensive house, the luxury car, the executive title, and the confidence of a man who thought the world belonged to him. And me? They called me the quiet one, the boring one, the one who had never done anything important with her life. But what they didn't know was that every paycheck my brother received came from a company whose controlling ownership belonged to someone they never bothered to ask about: me. And on Christmas Eve, after my own family called me a nobody, my brother finally discovered the truth. And the look on his face was something I'll never forget. My name is Samantha, and this is how my family learned that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. Christmas Eve had always been complicated in my family. My parents lived in a beautiful two-story house outside Chicago. Every December, the entire family gathered there for dinner. My mother loved appearances. Everything had to look perfect. The decorations had to be expensive. The food had to be impressive. And most importantly, everyone had to believe our family was successful. My older brother Daniel was her favorite example of that success. Daniel was 38 and worked as the chief operating officer of a rapidly growing technology company called North Star Dynamics. He drove a black luxury SUV. He wore designer suits. And whenever we had dinner together, he had a news story about another business deal, another investor, or another executive meeting. My parents couldn't have been prouder. They introduced him to everyone as my son, the businessman. I was introduced differently. This is Samantha. She does some consulting work. That was their way of describing the company I'd spent 12 years building. They had no idea what my consulting business actually was, and I had never corrected them, because years earlier, I'd learned something important. People reveal who they really are when they think you have nothing to offer them. So I let my family believe I was ordinary, while I quietly built something much bigger. The company had originally been founded by 3 engineers. I had invested in it when it was still a tiny startup operating out of a rented office. At the time, almost everyone told me I was wasting my money. But I believed in the technology. Over the next several years, North Star exploded. The company's valuation eventually crossed $20 million. And through a series of private investments and ownership transfers, I became the majority shareholder. I never became CEO. I never appeared in interviews. I didn't need the attention. I preferred staying behind the scenes. Even Daniel didn't know who the majority owner was. He assumed it was a group of venture capital firms. And honestly, I was happy to let him believe that. Until Christmas Eve. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house carrying a simple gift bag. I wasn't wearing anything expensive, just a dark sweater, black pants, and a small silver necklace. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later. The moment he walked through the door, my mother rushed toward him. "Oh, look at my handsome son!" She hugged him like he'd just returned from winning a war. Then she noticed me standing near the fireplace. Her smile faded slightly. "Samantha, you're here already?" I laughed softly. "It's Christmas, Mom." She shrugged. "Of course." Dinner started beautifully. For the first 30 minutes, everyone talked about Daniel, his promotion, his new car, his upcoming business trip. Then my father raised his glass. "To Daniel," he said proudly. "The most successful person in this family." Everyone applauded. I smiled and lifted my glass too. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You know, Dad," he said, "North Star might be worth 50 million within the next few years. My mother looked amazed. 50 million? Daniel nodded. Easy. Then he looked at me. What about you, Samantha? The table went quiet. What are you doing these days? I smiled. Still consulting. Daniel laughed. Right. Consulting. He looked at my mother. I still don't understand how she can live like that. My mother sighed. She always liked keeping things small. My father added, some people just aren't ambitious. Everyone laughed. Except me. I took a slow sip of water. Daniel leaned closer. You know, Samantha, if you ever need a real job, I could probably get you an administrative position at North Star. My mother laughed. That would actually be perfect for her. I looked at my brother. An administrative position? He smiled. Don't take it personally. You just don't seem like the corporate type. I almost laughed. The man offering me an entry-level job was unknowingly working for me, but I said nothing. Then Daniel made the mistake that changed everything. He raised his glass and said, to people who actually contribute something. My father laughed. My mother joined him. I looked around the table, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired of pretending. I put my fork down. Daniel, I said calmly. He looked at me. Yes? Do you like working at North Star? He smiled proudly. Of course. Good. I stood up. I hope you still do tomorrow. His smile disappeared. What does that mean? Nothing. I picked up my purse. My mother frowned. Where are you going? Home? My father shook his head. Don't be dramatic. I looked at him. I'm not. Then I walked out. I didn't explain anything. I didn't reveal anything. And I didn't need to. Because the truth was already moving toward them. The next morning was Christmas Day. At around 9:17 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. He was still at my parents' house. He answered casually. Daniel speaking. Then his expression changed. What? He stood up. What do you mean the board called an emergency meeting? Everyone looked at him. He listened silently. Then the color drained from his face. Who requested it? Another pause. What do you mean, the majority shareholder? My mother looked confused. Daniel hung up. What happened? My father asked. Daniel didn't answer. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. He opened it and stared at the screen. The email contained a single attachment, a corporate ownership statement. At the bottom was the name of the majority shareholder. Daniel read it once. Then again, his hands started shaking. My mother walked toward him. Daniel, what is it? He looked at her. His voice was barely audible. Samantha. My father frowned. What about Samantha? Daniel turned the phone around. My mother's eyes widened. My father stopped breathing for a second, because there it was. The majority owner of North Star Dynamics. The person controlling more than 60% of the company. The person whose approval was required for major executive decisions. Was me, Samantha. The daughter they had called unsuccessful. The sister they had called a nobody. The woman Daniel had offered an administrative job. My mother sat down. No, Daniel whispered. She owns the company. My father stared at the screen. That's impossible. But it wasn't. A few minutes later, Daniel received another message. It was from the company's chairman. The message said, please be advised that Samantha has requested a formal review of executive compensation and corporate governance. Daniel's face went completely pale. He had spent years approving expenses, signing contracts, and making decisions without ever knowing who actually had the final authority. Now, he knew, and he was terrified. But here's the part they didn't expect. I wasn't trying to destroy Daniel. I wasn't interested in revenge. I didn't want his job. I didn't want his house. I didn't want my parents to suffer. I simply wanted them to understand that their judgment of me had never been based on who I really was. It had been based on what they assumed I was. That afternoon, I returned to my parents' house. Nobody spoke when I walked through the door. Daniel stood in the living room. He looked completely different from the confident man I'd seen the night before. He approached me slowly. "Samantha." I looked at him. "Yes? Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled. "You never asked." He looked down. Then he said something I never expected. I was wrong. I didn't respond immediately. My mother started crying. She said, "We thought you were struggling." "I know. We thought Daniel was the one who made something of himself." "I know." My father looked at me. "Why did you hide all of this from us?" I took a breath. "Because I wanted to know whether you would love me without it." Nobody answered, and that silence said everything. Daniel finally looked at me. "Are you going to fire me?" I shook my head. "No." He looked surprised. "But I am going to change the way North Star operates." I told him there would be a formal review of executive compensation. No special treatment. No family connections. No inflated bonuses. No decisions based on ego. Everything would be based on performance. Daniel nodded. For the first time in my life, my brother didn't argue with me. He simply said, "That's fair." Then he looked at the Christmas tree. "I wish I'd known who you were." I smiled. "You knew exactly who I was, Daniel." He looked confused. "You just didn't think I was important." He had no answer. That night, I stayed for dinner. But something was different. There were no speeches about Daniel being the family's greatest success. There were no jokes about my little consulting career. And there was no competition. Just a family sitting around a table, finally seeing each other without the labels we'd carried for years. A few months later, North Star dynamics grew even more. Daniel kept his position, but he became a different man. He stopped bragging. He stopped comparing himself to everyone. And, surprisingly, he started asking for my advice. My parents changed too. Not overnight, but slowly. My mother eventually told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I spent so many years being impressed by what people could see that I forgot to ask what was underneath." I told her it was okay, because I had already forgiven them. But I also learned something that Christmas. You don't have to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't exposing your success. It's simply walking away and allowing the truth to introduce itself. So if you've ever been treated like the least important person in your family, remember this. Being underestimated doesn't make you insignificant. Sometimes, it simply means the people around you haven't taken the time to discover who you've become. And when the truth finally comes out, you won't need to say, "I told you so." They'll already know. If this story touched you, remember to like the video and subscribe to Juliana Calm Drama for more emotional family stories, unexpected betrayals, and powerful endings. And tell me in the comments, would you have revealed the truth to your family that Christmas night? Or would you have stayed silent like Samantha? I'll see you in the next story.